Hello, I'm Catherine Sines, the president of the Rotary Club of Hudson. Rotary is a professional organization of a group of men and women who support Rotary International. We also join together by a common interest of service to our Hudson community, and we have a sincere desire to give back. We meet weekly on Wednesdays at Laurel Lake Retirement Community, 200 Laurel Lake Drive, in their dining room. We meet from 7:30 to 8:30 and would like to invite you to join us. For more information about Rotary, go to www.rotaryhudson.org. Enjoy the following excerpts from one of our recent meetings and consider joining us on Wednesday morning. I'm the president of the Rotary, Hudson Rotary. My name's Catherine Sines. Invocation this morning is by Rich Warfield. Rich? Rich? Should I pray that he comes up?
I was in deep conversation with another Rotarian. Let us bow our heads. Lord God, as I was driving to Rotary this morning, I saw the school bus lights flashing, and it just reminded me it's that time, Lord. Just protect our children, and their safety comes first, and protect all our school teachers and guide them and make sure they make the proper decisions, using you as their center, and in our administrators also, Lord. And we pray for our government officials and all these men and women in this Rotary Club meeting today, Lord. Thank you for allowing them to come to this meeting and eating healthy food, and thank you for the beautiful day that we're about to enjoy. In your great and powerful name we pray. Amen.
Amen. About eating healthy food. I had to stretch it a little bit.
Thank you, Rich. And Rotarian Rebecca Moore will come forward and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and the four-way test.
Good morning. I'm honored to be here. Thank you for including me as a member today, and please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And the four-way test of the things we do and of the things we think, say, or do. First, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will and better friendships. Fourth, will be beneficial to all concerned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And next, Songmeister. I told someone this morning that this always makes my week.
Yeah, I had planned to sing When You're Smiling, but James Field took all the words with him. So what we're going to do is sing America. Here we go. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim pride, from every mountainside, let freedom ring. Thank you.
And next, Chris Barker, will you come up and introduce our visitors?
Thank you. Good morning, Rotarians and guests. We have a lot of visitors with us today, so when I call their name, if they can please stand so we can give them a warm Rotary welcome. We have Mike Hogan and his son Will Hogan. They're Hudson residents, and they read about our meeting in the Hub, I believe. Thank you for joining us. And then we have Dr. Bob Graves from Hudson Chiropractic. Thank you for joining us. And Richard Nebbiolo joining us again. Thank you, Richard. Sue Carter joining us again. And I believe I saw Bob Conrad sneak on in. Is he still here? Oh, never mind. Well, welcome, everyone.
Thanks, Chris. I wanted to remind everybody in the announcements that it's the first day back to school. Please be careful driving. And just think about it when you see these kids. Do you remember one of your first days back to school? My granddaughters yesterday, I was talking to them, and they were worried about what they were going to wear, whether they had their supplies, and the most important thing was a new teacher. So think about that when you're driving around, and just be careful and slow down. Give yourself a little extra time. Membership, Evan, would you like to come up? Sorry, Evan and Rich. Oh, and Mike. And Mike. Sorry.
Good morning, fellow Rotarians. Hey, Rebecca, you got to join us up here as well. Come on down. All right, we're going to use this as an opportunity to introduce Mike Swain as the newest representative on the membership committee. So we're excited to have him. He's done a great job in his short time as a Rotarian here, sharing his Rotary value proposition, talking to all of his friends. So we look forward to doing some good stuff with Mike. Luckily, we have probably 5, 10, 12 Rotarians that are thinking about joining right now. So you're walking into a good situation. All right, I'm going to call up President Catherine to do the induction. Thank you.
Rebecca Moore, on behalf of the board and the membership of the Rotary Club of Hudson, it's a great pleasure to welcome you as the newest member of the club. We look forward to the fellowship that we will share, as well as your participation in our many club projects that make our community, country, and world a better place in which to live. Rotary is an organization of business and professional people pledged to uphold the highest ethical and moral standards. Rotarians believe that worldwide fellowship and peace can be achieved through business people unite with Rotary motto of service above self. Rotary activities exemplify the charity and sacrifice that one would expect from people who believe that they have a responsibility to help others. Rebecca, you have been chosen for membership, or transfer of membership, in the Rotary Club of Hudson because your fellow members believe you to be a leader in our community and because you possess the qualities to champion the message and principles of Rotary. You now become an ambassador of Rotary, carrying the ideals of service to all within your sphere of influence. Our community will know and judge Rotary by your character and service. We will also look to you for inspiration as we strive to become better Rotarians. We ask that you wear your Rotary pin with pride that Evan's going to give you, not only to all Rotary functions, but in your many endeavors as a symbol of your commitment to Rotary ideals and our recognition of our contributions towards a better life. Fellow Rotarians, please rise and welcome our newest Rotarian, Rebecca. Did you pin her? I know. And then after you get pinned, Rebecca, would you please take a few minutes and tell a little bit about yourself?
Good morning, everybody. Thank you. I didn't prepare anything. I actually found my Aurora speech this morning that I had given when I was inducted into the Aurora Club. But I spent 3 years there, and it's a wonderful experience. I really feel throughout my whole life volunteering, giving to others, whether it's church. I've spent a lot of time as PTO president for my kids in Pennsylvania, and which are now 22 and 25. One doesn't live in state anymore. But Rotary exemplifies everything that I always say in Aurora, walking in the parade, we do good things. Service above self. It's going to always promote who you are and challenge you and set a path for wonderful success. And I'm so honored to be here. I've had many blessed experiences in life, work experiences. Last week I was asked a question, what is the most interesting thing you've ever done in your life? We had to go around the room in a business meeting. And I said, I was a flight attendant. Everybody finds a flight attendant back in the TWA eras of flying out of JFK, all international at a very young age, but had many world experiences, invaluable versus my education. I have a business marketing degree, and I've been in the skilled assisted living realm for about 8 years now. So I work with seniors. I've been a school teacher. I've worked for Starbucks. I've done a lot of different things. So it makes me flexible, and I love to speak to all of them. So I'm looking forward to getting very involved in the club, and just thank you. I'm honored. Thanks.
Thank you, Rebecca. The reason I put the mic down, she was back up here on her tippy toes trying to reach the mic. And Gail, will you want to come up and talk to us about the picnic, which I'm excited about?
Good morning, Rotarians. Thank you, President Signs. The clipboard is where right now? Evan's hand. Okay, it's making its rounds, so if you missed it last week or you didn't see my email, please sign up. It's this Saturday, 4 o'clock at Cascade Park. And I think we have a grill lined up. Yes, where are you, Tom? Yes, thank you. We have a grill. What we need now are a couple of grillers. Any raised hands who will help cook our wonderful hamburgers and hot dogs, our healthy food. Rebecca, all right, just jump right in there. How about one more, please? I'll even bring chairs for you to sit on. Joe, thank you. All right. We will still take reservations up through tomorrow, but then Tom and I have to purchase stuff. So please sign up or give me an email. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there any other announcements or anyone that needs to share anything that? Okay, thank you. So the next part of our program, Jim Ahern will introduce.
Good morning, Rotarians. Well, this is the third week of 5 weeks on energy. Oil and gas first week, solar energy, and this week will be about wind power. Craig Sundstrom he's from Apex, and if you haven't heard of Apex, you'll learn all about Apex in the next 40 minutes. Craig Sundstrom, our speaker, is an attorney and public policy professional with expertise in state and federal energy and environmental issues. He manages Apex Clean Energies, government regulatory affairs in Ohio, Oklahoma, and throughout the Midwest. Previously, he served as Deputy Secretary of Energy for the state of Oklahoma and a Senior Legislative Associate for the National Governors Association. He holds a BA in Political Science from Marietta College and a JD from Oklahoma City University School of Law. Let's give a healthy welcome from Rotary to Craig Sundstrom.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jim. All right, let me get my remarks here. So, something that I think is common among students is, when they're in school, they say, when am I ever going to use this class? And I should tell you that when I was in college, I did sing in the concert choir, so I'm glad that that came in handy this morning, probably for the first time since I graduated. Thanks so much, Jim, for the introduction. It's definitely a pleasure to be here with you this morning and the opportunity to discuss with you the promise of Ohio wind power.
For me and my family, the reason it's important to us that the setbacks are reversed is because our kids are part of the Elmhurst City Schools. To us, it's important that they also get access to those same resources that the other kids in our community are getting. That access to increased education, the benefits of that can't be beat, and it makes it the most important thing for us is that our kids have access to things other children in this country don't have access to, all because these windmills are providing financial gains for our local school systems.
And it makes energy for the TV for us to play.
I guess it's important to me to see that those are changed. Number one, to give a fair shake to a different company that's trying to do the same thing for our community. When you have someone trying to improve our area, I don't see any reason why we should stop that based upon those setbacks.
I think a setback for a wind turbine on my property, I think is just absolutely crazy. Owning the property and paying tax on the property, but I should be able to put what I want.
I know if the setbacks would be changed, that potentially more projects could come into our district, and there'd be new revenue streams. So from a revenue stream, I'm all for that. If they're changed, we would benefit, and hopefully we can give back even more to our community than what we're doing right now.
Apex Clean Energy is actually based in Charlottesville, Virginia. I live just down the road here in Hartville, Ohio, as Jim mentioned, and I manage our government and regulatory affairs here in the state, in Oklahoma, and across the Midwest. Apex builds, owns, and operates utility-scale wind and solar power facilities. So that means we're the big farms. If you've ever driven out west, going out of Ohio into Indiana, you've certainly seen them along the highway there. We have a number of projects in the most windy states like Texas and Oklahoma, and we're working throughout the Midwest and especially here in Ohio. In 2015, Apex was the U.S. market leader for wind capacity installations and has brought nearly 1,700 megawatts of wind power projects online over the past 2 years. We actually recently announced our intent to commercialize at least 7.5 gigawatts of renewable energy projects by 2020. So we're looking at about at least 1.5 gigawatts every year through 2020. And we're very confident we're going to hit that goal. We've got a team of about 200 professionals in the nation's largest wind energy project pipeline, and we're a leader in the transition to the clean energy future. At Apex, we truly believe in the promise of wind power. By utilizing state-of-the-art technology, the U.S. wind energy industry is revolutionizing America's power markets. Last year, the U.S. wind industry added more than 8,200 megawatts of capacity, representing 27% of all energy capacity additions, and wind supplied about 6% of U.S. electricity in 2016, and that number is growing. 14 states now get more than 10% of their power from wind. That's 14 states. And the cost of wind power technology has steadily declined over the last 8 years. So improving and more efficient technology has actually led wind power to a point where developers like Apex can offer power prices that are actually competitive and compare favorably with power from natural gas generation in 2017 now, and certainly going into the future. And if you think that state-of-the-art technology in a booming market sounds like the perfect recipe for STEM-focused students, you'd be right. According to the U.S. Department of Labor, wind turbine technician is the fastest growing job occupation in the country, and continued growth in the field is expected. And I'll tell you, I think that's really good news for folks like Will, one of our guests here in the back. I got to meet Will shortly before we got started, and I believe you said you're a junior in environmental engineering, and he's here because I think he also believes in the future of wind power, and certainly we're eager to get students like Will into the fold, so thanks for being here, Will. Analysts project that annual wind power capacity additions will continue at a rapid clip for the next several years, even with the coming phase out of the industry's only federal subsidy. We believe that even as the production tax credit is phased out, and it'll be phased down by 2020, and that's something that the wind industry negotiated with Congress back in 2015, new opportunities will present themselves, and that financing wind energy projects will actually get easier as we move away from the need for tax equity financing. I really want to highlight this point because I think that it's a common misconception that renewable energy is simply a highly subsidized industry and that's the only reason why we're growing. We are the nation's only energy industry that has advocated for a responsible phase down of our only federal subsidy. And so past 2020, we'll be operating on the merits of the free market, and we're very confident in what that future looks like. These new opportunities are already taking shape in a number of forms. Not only are utilities and ratepayers eager for low-cost, environmentally friendly, and thus less costly on everyone's electric bills wind power, and this has been demonstrated recently by Ohio's own American Electric Power and their announcement just a few weeks ago that they intend to bring online a 2 gigawatt, that's a 2,000 megawatt project in the panhandle of Oklahoma to serve their customers in the eastern part of the U.S. But we also know that U.S. corporations, often called job creators, are leading in this field as well. Recent study shows that 63% of Fortune 100 companies and nearly 50% of Fortune 500 companies currently have a renewable energy target, a greenhouse gas reduction target, an energy efficiency target, or some combination of all three. at least 23 Fortune 500 companies, including companies like Walmart, Amazon, General Motors, and Facebook, which just announced a new data center in Central Ohio, have committed to 100% renewable energy targets. That's right, 100% of their energy needs will be served by wind or solar power. In 2015, over half of all new power purchase agreements for wind power came from private corporations. And that was quite a departure, I think, from the trend up until that point, where generally utilities were in the business of buying utility scale wind. But now most of our the outreach we do with customers is with corporations that are looking for that price hedge, and they're looking to partner with folks like in companies like Apex Clean Energy to deliver their energy needs. When we can partner with corporations to find long-term solutions to their power needs, we help keep costs down for these job creators and free up capital to be reinvested in company resources and their people. This is the real promise of wind power: low cost, long-term price certainty to fuel economic development. Renewable energy is also working for the nation's men and women in uniform. And let me give you this example. This spring, in early 2017, Apex completed a groundbreaking for a 65 megawatt hybrid wind and solar project for the U.S. Army's Fort Hood base in Texas. It's the largest renewables project ever backed by the U.S. military, which itself is the country's largest electricity consumer. These projects will supply about half of Fort Hood's electricity needs. And Apex will procure the remainder of the base's requirements within the competitive power market and sell that bundled package to Fort Hood. So in effect, Apex has become the lone supplier of power to Fort Hood, the world's largest military base by size. The deal is expected to save the Army more than $100 million in electricity costs over the project lifetime. So $100 million in electricity cost savings to the U.S. Army means energy security for Fort Hood, because the power is produced locally, price certainty. The cost of the wind and solar fuel will never fluctuate, and it will never go up. In fact, it'll always remain zero, and a smaller bill for the American taxpayer. It's a win-win-win situation all around. So let's talk about wind power in Ohio. How do these recent trends for wind power currently translate to Ohio? Is Ohio benefiting from lower electric bills and economic development associated with wind power production? We would say not really. In 2016, the U.S. Energy Information Administration estimated that about 2.2% of Ohio's power came from renewables, and less than half of that from wind. In fact, we think Ohio's at a clean energy crossroads. You see, for the last few years, lawmakers in Columbus have been debating a number of issues related to energy development in Ohio. We most recently saw efforts to eliminate the state's renewable portfolio standard that requires 12.5% of electricity sold by Ohio's electric distribution utilities or electric services companies must be generated from renewable energy sources by 2027. Governor Kasich vetoed that bill at the end of last year, and we applauded that effort. And another similar bill is actually working its way through the legislative process right now. But another issue, though, is central to wind power's growth in Ohio. In 2014, without notice, hearing, or substantive debate, lawmakers changed the rules of the game midway for wind development in Ohio. Up until that time, wind turbines had to be placed 1,125 feet plus the height of the blade, of the turbine blade, from all habitable structures, that is, residences. This is a sound development practice. It's rooted in public safety. Think about 1,125 feet plus the height of the blade. If you consider the height of a wind turbine, if it were to fall over, that would be the height of the turbine, plus we add another 1,125 feet. That was a sound development practice. It was rooted in public safety, like I mentioned, and similar to standards in many jurisdictions across the Midwest. But in the 2014 budget process, that setback distance was moved to be measured from all property lines. So not just houses, but from every property line. And if you think about Northwest Ohio, the windiest part of the state where wind power would make the most sense, you certainly are aware, if you've ever taken a flight out of the state, that we have a patchwork of farmland in Ohio. Unlike states like Oklahoma and Texas, where we can build massive wind power projects with one or two landowners, right? We need to work with hundreds of landowners to make this work. And so now we are in a situation where we need to seek either permission from neighboring properties or receive leases from that many more landowners because that setback was moved from the property line. So what's happened? Well, since that law took effect, not one new application for a wind turbine project has been submitted to the Ohio Power Siting Board. So for the last 3 years, we've seen no new activity for wind power in Ohio. This new property line setback is actually served as what we call a de facto moratorium on wind power development in Ohio, and is nothing more than an artificial and unjustified restriction on the free market. At Apex, we have 5 wind projects in development in Ohio, all of which were started before the rules were changed. So what do these 5 projects, what is Apex's project portfolio in Ohio? What does that mean for Ohio and its communities? We estimate those projects would attract about $2.5 billion worth of private investment. 1,300 megawatts in total energy production, so enough to power 400,000 Ohio homes, over 625 short-term construction jobs, and over 65 full-time, well-paying technical operations jobs. As an industry, we are actively seeking a legislative solution to this issue. And I should note, we definitely appreciate the leadership of Senate President Larry Ophoff, who I know you'll be hearing from in a few weeks. Under President Ophoff's leadership, and with great support from amendment co-sponsors Senator Cliff Height from Northwest Ohio, Senator Matt Dolan of Cleveland, and certainly we've got great support from Hudson's own Senator Frank LaRose. The Senate included a setback fix in their version of the state's budget this summer. Unfortunately, the Ohio House of Representatives refused to make the change. By failing to address the current property line setback for wind, the legislature is missing a significant opportunity to modernize the state's energy mix, provide savings to ratepayers, and shape a business climate attractive to local communities and Fortune 500 companies alike. Wind developers, utilities, and corporations, though, are not the only ones missing out on wind energy's potential in Ohio. Local communities, the foundation of a good wind project, are missing out too. Take our Long Prairie Wind Project located in Northwest Ohio. It's in Van Wert County. Upon completion, this project would inject $41 million in landowner payments, $81 million in school payments, another $41 million in county and township payments, 200 local jobs during construction, and 20 long-term local operations jobs all over the project lifetime. So think about that. For landowners that are interested in participating in the Long Prairie Wind Project, these are by and large rural landowners. This is Northwest Ohio on the border of Indiana. Over a 15, 20-year project lifetime, those families would see an aggregate $41 million injected into their pocketbooks. That is significant economic development for Northwest Ohio. And right now it's being blocked by one line of statute in Ohio law. I did, unfortunately, we did have some technical difficulties. I did want to show a short video that we put together in Van Wert County, hearing from landowners about what wind power would mean for them. I will, maybe you could just jot this down, but we have a YouTube page. So if you search for Apex Clean Energy on YouTube, we have a YouTube channel there. And I believe the video is called Ohioans in Their Own Words. And it's a 2-minute video. I'd love for you to check that out because I think it tells a really great story about the potential that wind power has for an Ohio community in Northwest Ohio. From our view, the stakes are clear. Ohio's energy policy can unleash economic development and fuel substantial job growth with new renewable energy, or it can continue to stunt growth in Ohio while its neighbors sprint to the future. The shift to clean energy is happening, and we think Ohio should be leading the way. With that, I'd be happy to take some questions. Yeah, please.
Can you give me an idea of what a megawatt and a gigawatt powers? I think you said the megawatt powered X number of homes, but to me, I don't know the difference. I'm just curious.
Sure. It's a hard question to answer, especially at the 1 megawatt level. Maybe what we'll do is I'll kind of give you an idea of what a typical utility scale wind project looks like. So we're talking about the larger projects, you know, anywhere from 50 to 450 megawatts. That is it's obviously a unit of measurement of what the energy is produced. So, for example, Long Prairie Wind, which is, I mentioned in Van Wert County in Northwest Ohio. It's a project that we would like to build that's under development. We estimate that'll be, when it comes online and we actually get that going, it'll be 450 megawatts. And for that project, we estimate, oh, you know what, I don't have it with me, but a few 100,000 homes will be powered with that. Now, a gigawatt is 1,000 megawatts. So when we're thinking about mega projects, like the one that AEP just announced in the Oklahoma Panhandle, that's a 2 gigawatt, so a 2,000 megawatt project. And their estimates for the number of homes that that would power is quite significantly larger than that.
What are the main objections that you're finding, and is Northwest Ohio the prime place in Ohio as far as you're concerned?
Yes, and so your first question was, what are the main objections? So quite frankly, we really are generally hearing just from landowners that tell us they don't want to see a wind turbine. And so these tend to be neighboring landowners that perhaps are not interested in signing up for a wind project, but they say that they don't like the impact on their view from their home. In terms of other objections, we really aren't hearing any, to be frank. This past year, the Ohio Chamber of Commerce came out in support of fixing the setback requirement. When we actually were working on the provision in the budget to fix the setback requirement at the state level this spring, we had a proponent list of something like 90 organizations and companies that were interested in making the change. And we did not have any opposition other than some local landowner groups that said that they didn't like to see wind turbines.
So Northwest Ohio, you're talking?
That's correct. And so most of the wind development in Ohio, there are, I believe, 3 operating projects in Ohio. They're all located on the western border of Ohio, northwest Ohio, kind of south of Toledo on the Indiana border. They are in operation. They got built before the law was changed. I should say they were permitted also before the law was changed. But that is where the bulk of development is happening. And it's a matter of the resource, right? So you hear from oil and gas operators, they're going to go to where the resource is. Wind is very much the same. In Northwest Ohio, there are great prevailing winds that come down, from the Great Lakes, kind of over Toledo and down that western border of Ohio, and that tends to be where the highest capacity factors are for wind. Certainly, I will say, though, that efficiencies in wind turbine technology have grown at a scale that is enabling us to build in places where it was not previously feasible. But for now, Northwest Ohio is definitely sort of the hotbed for wind development in the state.
You have a couple questions. One is APEC an umbrella organization, or is it an operating company, or a combination of both, or what?
We're a private corporation. We own all of our projects until we sell them.
So you're actually operating these things then?
We do. So we develop. So we as early as the greenfield stage, where we're just going from a piece of land that we think would be a good location for a wind project.
Okay.
We develop projects there, so we work on site control, working with landowners, working on interconnection to the transmission grid, and then we find the customers. But we also do in Charlottesville, in our office down there, we have what's called the Remote Operations Control Center. We like to call it the ROC, which really sounds pretty cool. And we actually operate a number of wind farms, both in the U.S. and Canada. We actually now operate 2 wind farms in Canada for IKEA Corporation. And those are 24-hour, 365 around-the-clock operations where we've got 12-hour shifts working at all times to make sure that our wind farms are doing what they need them to do.
Okay. What's the status of of using Lake Erie as a wind farm?
So my understanding is that it's the Lead Co project. It's a significantly smaller project than the ones that Apex typically builds, but certainly it's exciting because I think that it will show the promise of offshore wind in the Great Lakes. My understanding is that the Ohio Power Siting Board has moved forward with that application, but I'm not quite up to speed on what their construction timeline is. I imagine it's in the next few years.
I got a question over here.
Sure.
Thanks for your presentation. I was not aware of the extent of the penetration of wind farms into provision of electricity. My question is, given the fact that the wind does not always blow and does not blow everywhere, how important is the cost of transmission of electricity and the storage of electricity to providing wind power electricity?
Sure. Yeah. So, and for folks in the back that I'm not sure if you could hear all of that. The question was, because wind is what we call an intermittent resource, the wind doesn't blow all the time, just like the sun doesn't shine all the time for solar. How important is transmission and storage?
Battery storage.
And battery storage, that's right. So I will say transmission capacity is top of mind for the wind power industry. We have an electric grid in the United States that was built in some parts of the country 100 years ago, and in some parts of the country hasn't been updated since then. And so when we're talking about how to best harness wind power resources and get them to customers where they're needed, we have sort of this situation where the windiest parts of the country are kind of straight through the Great Plains. So Kansas, Oklahoma, Nebraska, Texas. But you'll know that that most of the demand and load for wind or for power generally is on the coast. So we're in a situation where we need really good transmission to get that power where it's needed most. On a more micro level, it's something that gets to the heart of the development process. So while Northwest Ohio is a fantastic resource for wind, it wouldn't be quite so fantastic if there wasn't transmission resources there already that we could tie into. And so transmission issues are something that we work on intensely because it absolutely gets to the viability of wind power production. In terms of storage, storage it's still generally a new technology, but I think that it holds a lot of promise. I know that our folks are looking hard at how to combine perhaps, and we're right now kind of thinking hypothetically, but how do you combine large-scale battery storage with wind production so that when the wind's not blowing, you still have some viable power at that location. My understanding is just like wind turbine technology, the costs have been declining rapidly over the last few years. I think that battery storage is similar. And so I think in that regard, once we get to that sort of price parity point, we'll be talking a lot more about storage in the renewable space.
Driving around in southern Minnesota and obviously northwest Ohio and seeing these big fans, moving around, I often wonder, and a lot of people think I'm strange here anyway, but how would a tornado affect those things? How do they hold up in those strong storms?
Yeah, so it's a good question, and I used to work in Oklahoma, so if you want to talk about tornadoes, let's talk about Oklahoma. It certainly impacts the wind turbines, I think, are minimal. It's not something that we see very often. It's kind of like a lightning strike, right? But they do happen, and so, wind turbines are made, they're massive structures. They're made almost entirely out of steel. And so from, in our experience, I think that they've been pretty resilient in weather. Sometimes blades, do get impacted by high winds or tornadoes, but we have contingencies in place for that. And typically what we can do, especially for projects that we operate, we can shut that turbine down from a distance, make sure that it's not operational until we can get our folks out there to fix it. And so, in terms of aggregate impacts on the industry, I think weather events are fairly minimal. Sir.
When you're down in Columbus, and you mentioned, the angry landowners are part of your problem getting legislation to the Ohio House. When you run into lobbyists from First Energy or from the coal industry, what is their position on wind power?
It's a good question. The way I would characterize it is this. The utility business is changing rapidly. And I think when we are thinking about this fall in the legislature, what opportunities might exist to get the setback for wind turbines fixed, we're faced with a situation where there are a number of bills floating out there that would drastically alter Ohio's utility landscape. One of the utilities that you mentioned is seeking subsidies for nuclear generation. Another utility is seeking to re-regulate the power sector in Ohio. And yet another one is seeking to subsidize coal-fired power for some pretty old power plants. And so I think we would say that wind power also has the potential to revolutionize the utility industry. I think it's doing that already. And so we would seek to be a part of any piece of legislation that was going to move and continue to alter the landscape, because quite frankly, we are an industry that's not seeking a subsidy. We are simply seeking to operate on the free market. And we don't have a lot of competitors that can say the same right now.
I realize that you're speaking primarily of commercially generated wind power.
That's right.
But there are parts of the country, particularly the Northeast, but other parts of the country, where site-specific wind power is really taken hold, and in many cases being used to power schools
Yep.
or public utility operations, as well as individual operations, farming, etc.
Sure.
How do you see that operational approach working in conjunction with the developing commercial industry?
Sure. No, it's a good question. And you know, my in-laws are farmers in Northeast Kansas, and they are no stranger to small distributed windmills, right? I mean, they've had them out.
I grew up with them.
That's right. They've had them out on the back 40 for 100 years, and they've been using them, and now the technology is just better, quite frankly. And so we see it here in Ohio. Whirlpool Corporation in Marion, Ohio, they just broke ground, and I believe they already have some turbines operational, but I think they're adding to that, where they've got a few utility scale size wind turbines on their own property, what we call behind the fence. And so that will serve their physical electricity needs. I think we see distributed wind as something that is part of the changing utility landscape. I think customers, both residents and corporations, especially now that the technology is within grasp in terms of affordability, they see a real opportunity to own their energy generation costs. I think the utility wind scale wind industry can serve as a great partner to them. So, you know, I haven't spoken to them about this, but let's use it as a hypothetical. Whirlpool, if they're further seeking to bring down their energy costs, we can complement their on-site generation with a 20-year PPA for low-cost wind power as soon as we can get wind projects built in Northwest Ohio. So I'd say that we're on the same team.
So you would work with coalitions of independent producers of wind power?
I think we do already. Yeah, certainly here in Ohio. I mean, we are a member of a number of clean energy coalitions that includes you know, rooftop solar companies, distributed wind companies, manufacturers of wind turbine components. I think we're all, you know, moving towards the same goal. Yeah, sir.
Is there a minimum number of windmills that you need to make a situation profitable?
It's absolutely site specific. So I mean, typically it's a business that is a matter of scale, because if we can get out there and build a larger project and find customers for that power, that tends to make more sense. It's because it's a matter of scale. It helps us to drive the price down. But we work on projects of all sizes. We have some operational projects that are 200 megawatts, and we're trying to develop a project in Northwest Ohio that's 450, and the numbers work. Yeah, so to be very direct, there's not a minimum set in stone, but it is site specific based on our ability to site control, so how much land we have, access to transmission resources like was mentioned, the resource itself, how windy is it and how often, and what does the customer base look like. Yeah.
When I think of wind power, I think of Palm Springs. Is California the leading state in wind power production?
I believe that Texas is.
Oh, Texas.
Yeah. I believe that Texas is. California certainly is a leader, and they were an early adopter. But you'll note, I mean, Texas has got some pretty incredible windy resources and a lot of land, and so it's actually made sense. And to get back to the transmission question from earlier, Texas also a number of years ago decided to advance transmission in a way that would help bring more renewable resources online. And that addition of new transmission resources has really helped spur wind power production in the state.
Question on the mechanics. I've driven through Texas one time when they're all spinning like crazy, another time they're barely moving. When a turbine is just barely moving, is it still producing electricity?
It is.
And briefly, how does that work?
Well, it's you know, and I might need to get my environmental engineer in the back here to help answer that. But you know, my understanding is as turbine heights get higher and the efficiencies become greater, we actually are in a situation where we can place less turbines on the same amount of land to produce the same amount of power. And so it's a function of the gearbox mechanism. And my understanding is that, yes, at those low speeds, we are still producing power and still selling that power.
I see on 480 West, going towards west side of Cleveland when I drive there, and I see a turbine there. And I was just curious. It doesn't look like it's 1,000 feet away from anything. It looks like it's right in the midst of buildings.
And, well, see, and the question is, I don't, well, I believe that rests on the definition of what utility scale project is. So I think because it's one turbine, that might meet a different threshold than the permits that we need to try to get. Yeah, and I imagine it was built before 2014. I know it's similar to if you go, what is that, on Route 2, Lincoln Electric. I think they've got a few east of Cleveland. I think they've got a couple turbines up there as well. But I believe it rests on the definition of what a utility scale project is.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just a basic question.
Sure.
Is the taller the turbine, the better it is? I mean, is generally speaking, is there better wind flow up higher than?
I think generally that's safe to say. I mean, again, it's site specific, but certainly what we've seen as the technology has improved, we have been able to use taller turbines, which tend to be more efficient. Yeah.
You mentioned a couple times in your talk about the life of a turbine. What dictates that?
The mechanics, the mechanics inside the gearbox. So, I mean, well, I should say it's the mechanics, and then also the horizon that we're able to guarantee a price for our customers. So, typically, I think one of the greatest values for wind production is that we're able to guarantee a price to corporations and utilities for sometimes 15, 20 years. And as long as we keep those turbines spinning, they're going to continue to produce power. And I mentioned that we've got full-time technical staff at our projects. They're mechanics, and they're there to make sure that those projects continue to spin and they're operational and they're in working order.
So your economic life is typically 20 years at the outside?
I think that's fair. Yeah.
At which point you need to replace the entire thing if you wanted to continue to do it, or?
No, actually.
The tower is just like a platform upon which you can.
That's right. We can actually just go in and update the mechanics of the gearbox.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Okay.
I think we've got one more.
Just real quick, where are they produced?
The components themselves?
Yeah, the components.
So it's fascinating. The American Wind Energy Association just came out with a map that shows both wind projects that are online and manufacturers that are manufacturing component parts. And so I looked at Ohio and was absolutely amazed at the number of manufacturers in Northeast Ohio that are working on some component of the wind turbine. These are steel structures, and so certainly to the extent that American companies are manufacturing them, we think that's fantastic. We know that Timken Corporation in Canton, they work on wind turbine components, and that's becoming a larger part of their business. I think for a number of years we saw European companies were really leading the way. But now, as a company, Apex, we partner with companies like General Electric. There's a great company in Michigan that I don't know that we've partnered with yet, but I know that they're manufacturing wind turbines called Ventower. And certainly, I think the manufacturing potential for wind is pretty great.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was awesome. I want to thank the greeters, Liz Ramsey, Ed Sogan, Audio Visual, Den Rich, Tom Page, Tom Tobin, James Field, Ron Barnhouse. And one of the things I wanted to ask this morning, there's two things. One, that we do have a board meeting right after. And the other one is if you're not receiving the emails, the friendly reminders, and make sure that you give me your email address, or if you're a guest and you want to see our future speakers, please give me your email address and I'll include you on our friendly reminder of who's speaking for the month, so that I never know who's getting actually the emails, or if you've changed the email. So if you need to update your email, please do that. The Rotobuck for today, I'm going to have our speaker pull. The Rotobuck today is for $13 and the jackpot is $323. And the last 4 digits are 0172. Woo. See, it's good you came with this. Oh, I'm giving you the wrong one.
Oh.
You'll never have to.
You don't want him to win. Right.
Nope. Sorry. Oh, take your envelope.
Oh, okay.
I want to thank everyone for being here, and remember, we must find time to stop and thank the people who make a difference in our lives. And please drive carefully for the kids.